In the heart of New York City's towering skyline, where glass facades reflected the ambitions of the elite, stood the opulent headquarters of Apex Global, a conglomerate that shaped industries from tech to finance. It was a crisp autumn morning on October 31, 2025, and the executive boardroom on the 72nd floor buzzed with anticipation. Sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows over the mahogany table laden with crystal water glasses and leather-bound agendas. Seated around it were the power players, sharp-suited men in their 40s and 50s, each a titan in their own right, their faces etched with the lines of high-stakes decisions. At the head of the table loomed Alexander Voss, the enigmatic billionaire CEO, his dark navy suit impeccably tailored, exuding an aura of unyielding control. His broad shoulders strained slightly against the crisp white shirt, and his silk tie, a deep crimson hue, was knotted with precision, perhaps a tad too tightly, though no one dared comment. Voss, at 48, was a legend. Orphaned young, he had clawed his way from a modest Brooklyn upbringing to amass a fortune that rivaled nations. Today's meeting was pivotal, a merger with a rival firm that could catapult Apex into trillion-dollar territory. As the team shuffled papers and murmured strategies, the door swung open, admitting Elena Marquez, the unassuming waitress from the in-house cafe downstairs. At 32, with her brunette hair pulled into a neat bun and her black vest uniform hugging her practical frame, Elena was the invisible thread keeping the building's elite caffeinated and content. She pushed a silver cart laden with steaming coffees and fresh pastries, her warm smile a brief respite in the room's tension. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said softly, her voice carrying a faint Spanish lilt from her immigrant roots. No one looked up except Voss, whose dark eyes met hers for a fleeting second, a nod of acknowledgement that felt oddly personal amid the corporate chill. Elena navigated the room with practiced grace, her sensible flats whispering against the plush carpet as she distributed the beverages. The air was thick with the aroma of dark roast and cinnamon scones, a mundane contrast to the multi-million-dollar deals unfolding. She placed a porcelain cup before each executive, noting their preferences from memory: black for the CFO, 2 sugars for the marketing head. When she reached Voss, he leaned back slightly, his fingers drumming the table's edge, a subtle sign of impatience that sent ripples of unease through the group. "The usual, Mr. Voss?" she asked, pouring the espresso with steady hands. He grunted affirmatively, his gaze drifting to the cityscape beyond, where clouds gathered like unspoken doubts. As she stepped back, her eyes caught something amiss: the knot of his tie pressed firmly against his collar, the fabric bunching unnaturally, restricting the subtle rise and fall of his neck. It was a small thing, the kind of oversight in a rushed morning routine, but to Elena, who had sewn her brother's uniforms as a teen in a cramped Queens apartment, it stood out like a loose thread in a tapestry. Without a second thought, she reached forward, her fingers brushing the silk. "Pardon me, sir," she murmured, "your collar's a bit off, it might chafe during such an important discussion." The room fell silent, forks pausing midair, as she gently loosened the knot, her touch light yet assured, readjusting the fabric to lie flat and free. Voss's breath, which had been shallow and labored without his notice, deepened imperceptibly, a quiet sigh escaping as circulation returned to his throat. He blinked, surprised by the relief, attributing it to the coffee's warmth rather than her intervention. Elena wheeled the cart away, oblivious to the murmurs resuming, her mind already on the lunch rush downstairs. Little did she know, that simple adjustment had averted a crisis brewing beneath the billionaire's composed facade, a latent allergic reaction to a new laundry detergent, manifesting as subtle swelling that the tight tie had exacerbated into a potential airway obstruction. The meeting plunged forward, Voss's voice booming with authority as he outlined the merger's synergies, his words slicing through projections on the digital screens. Graphs danced in vibrant blues and greens, illustrating revenue streams that could fund entire cities, yet beneath it all, Alexander felt an unusual fog lifting from his mind. He cleared his throat, the motion now effortless, and continued, crediting his clarity to the adrenaline of the deal. Around the table, executives nodded vigorously, their laptops humming with real-time valuations. Elena, back in the cafe's steamy kitchen, wiped counters and refilled urns, her thoughts wandering to her evening plans: a community college class on business administration, a dream deferred by years of double shifts to support her aging mother. She chuckled inwardly at the boardroom's formality, so removed from her world of grease-stained aprons and heartfelt tips from overworked interns. Upstairs, as Voss gestured emphatically, a faint dizziness had begun to ebb, the kind that might have escalated into full anaphylaxis had the constriction persisted. His personal physician, on retainer for such eventualities, had warned of sensitivities, but Voss dismissed vulnerabilities as weaknesses unfit for a man of his stature. The discussion heated, voices overlapping in debate over equity splits, and Voss leaned forward, his tie now swaying freely, a silent guardian against peril. Alina's act, born of instinct rather than intent, had woven her into the fabric of his survival, though she remained a ghost in his periphery, a fleeting kindness in a sea of calculated alliances. Hours ticked by, the sun climbing higher, bathing the boardroom in golden light that glinted off Voss's gold cufflinks. The merger talks reached a fever pitch, with legal clauses dissected like surgical precision. One executive, a wiry venture capitalist named Harlan, pushed back on valuation, his arguments laced with skepticism that tested Voss's patience. "We're undervaluing RIP," Harlan insisted, tapping his tablet. Voss's response was measured, his pulse steady now, thanks to that unassuming touch earlier. He recalled Alina's face briefly, earnest eyes, calloused fingertips from endless service, before refocusing. Downstairs, Elena handled a rush of baristas calling out orders, her laughter light as she bantered with a young coder who dreamed of startups. She adjusted her own collar absent-mindedly, mirroring the gesture, unaware of the ripple it had caused above. In the boardroom, as Voss sealed a tentative agreement with a firm handshake across the table, a wave of gratitude washed over him, misplaced but potent. He attributed his sharpened focus to the deal's momentum, not the waitress's mercy. The team broke for a brief recess, stretching legs and checking phones, while Voss lingered, staring at the tie in the reflective surface of a window. It hung perfectly now, a symbol of restored order. Elena, meanwhile, plated sandwiches for the afternoon service, her mind on rent due and scholarships elusive, blind to the life or death pivot she had engineered in a moment of quiet professionalism. Afternoon shadows lengthened across the skyline, the city's hum a distant soundtrack to the boardroom's crescendo. Voss steered the conversation toward risk assessments, his voice resonant and unhindered, each syllable commanding respect. The executives, emboldened by his vigor, proposed bold addendums, cross-industry ventures that could redefine markets. Harlan, now aligned, sketched timelines on a whiteboard, markers squeaking like eager conspirators. Voss nodded, his neck free of the vice-like pressure that had lurked, allowing him to envision futures unclouded by physical betrayal. In the café, Elena trained a new hire, her instructions patient and clear, drawing from years of navigating chaos with calm. She shared stories of quirky clients, omitting the billionaire's stoic gaze, filing it away as just another interaction. Upstairs, as coffee cups emptied and pastries dwindled, Voss felt a rare humility stir, how fragile the line between triumph and collapse, how unseen hands could steady it. He made a mental note to commend the catering staff, a vague impulse toward acknowledgement. The meeting surged on, projections finalized, handshakes exchanged, the merger inked in digital ether. Elena cleared a table nearby, overhearing snippets of jargon through the vent, synergies, leverage, words that fueled her late-night studies, even as she dismissed them as elite esoterica. As dusk painted the glass towers in hues of amber and indigo, the boardroom emptied gradually, executives dispersing to private jets and chauffeured sedans. Voss remained, poring over final documents, his tie loosened further in solitude, a concession to comfort. The adjustment earlier replayed in his mind, not as salvation but as an anomaly in his armored routine. He massaged his throat absently, noting the absence of strain, and wondered at the waitress's poise, unflinching in a den of wolves. Down in the café, winding down for the evening, Elena tallied receipts under fluorescent lights, her uniform dusted with flour from an impromptu baking demo. She dreamed aloud with colleagues about escapes, beach vacations, entrepreneurial leaps. The billionaire's world felt galaxies away, his life an untouchable narrative. Yet, in that disconnect lay the beauty of her deed, pure, uncalculated, a thread of humanity-piercing corporate veneer. Voss, packing his briefcase, glanced at the cart's abandoned spot, a spark of curiosity igniting. He resolved to learn her name, a rarity for one who viewed staff as fixtures. The building's elevators whispered departures, carrying away the day's deals, while Elena locked up, stepping into the cooling night, her steps light with purpose renewed. Night fell over Manhattan like a velvet curtain, stars obscured by neon glows and ambition's glare. Voss retreated to his penthouse atop Apex Tower, a minimalist fortress of steel and solitude overlooking Central Park. He shed his suit, the type pooling on the marble floor like shed skin, and poured a scotch neat, savoring the burn that grounded him. In the mirror, his reflection stared back, vital, unbroken, thanks to a stranger's touch. He replayed the meeting's triumphs, shares surging in after-hours trades, headlines brewing. But beneath the victory, a whisper of what-ifs. What if the fog had deepened, the words slurred into silence. His physician's voice echoed, monitor exposures, carry epinephrine, but Voss had scoffed, invincible in his ascent. Now, humility crept in, courtesy of Elena's unwitting grace. Miles away, in her modest walk-up in Astoria, Elena kicked off her shoes, the ache in her feet a familiar toll. She video-called her mother in Madrid, recounting the day's banalities over paella steam, laughter bridging oceans. The boardroom adjustment, a footnote, if remembered at all, overshadowed by tips that covered the electric bill. She curled up with a textbook, highlighter in hand, plotting her own ascent from service to strategy, inspired by glimpses of the elite's drive. Dawn broke with relentless efficiency, Voss's alarm a clarion call. At 5 a.m., he dressed anew, selecting a looser knot this time, a subtle shift in ritual born of yesterday's reprieve. The merger announcement dominated financial feeds, Apex's stock soaring, cementing his legend. In the lobby, as he strode toward his limo, he detoured to the cafe, an impulse defying his schedule. There, amid the morning rush, Elena frothed lattes, her smile automatic yet genuine. Their eyes met again, his probing, hers polite surprise. "You saved my meeting yesterday," he said, voice low over the espresso hum. "More than you know." Elena, right. She nodded, flushing slightly, stammering thanks for the compliment. He left a card, not for business but invitation, join us for coffee sometime. Perspectives matter. Stunned, she pocketed it, the laminated edge a talisman against doubt. The day unfolded routinely, orders, spills, small victories, but the encounter lingered, a crack in her worldview where possibility seeped in. Voss, en route to a summit, felt lighter, the tie's freedom a metaphor for alliances beyond boardrooms. In saving him, she had unwittingly opened doors to her own reinvention. Weeks blurred into a tapestry of transformations. Voss, ever the strategist, followed through, inviting Elena to a casual advisory lunch, not as subordinate but peer. She arrived nervous in borrowed heels, her insights on ground-level operations surprising the room with raw acuity. The merger thrived, but so did an unlikely mentorship, Voss sponsoring her MBA, Elena challenging his blind spots on workforce equity. The cafe became a launchpad, her colleagues cheering as promotions followed. Whispers spread through Apex corridors, of the waitress who steadied the titan, not just his collar but his perspective. Media caught wind, a viral tale of serendipity, from service to summit, the knot that tied fates. Elena's mother beamed from afar, pride swelling like tides. Voss, in quiet moments, reflected on fragility, how one adjustment unraveled isolation, weaving connections in its place. The boardroom, once a coliseum of conquest, softened with diverse voices, mergers not just financial but human. Elena, no longer invisible, stood taller, her hands now signing deals rather than serving them, the memory of that crimson silk a badge of unintended heroism. Months later, under a harvest moon mirroring that fateful October eve, Apex hosted a gala atop the tower, chandeliers cascading light like liquid gold. Voss, tie artfully askew by design, raised a toast to unsung architects of success. Elena, elegant in emerald silk, stood beside him, not as savior, but partner in progress, her speech weaving tales of overlooked labors into calls for inclusive empires. The city sprawled below, a mosaic of dreams deferred and dared, and in that vista, their stories converged, his reclaimed breath, her ascended voice. The adjustment of a collar had been no mere fix, it was a fulcrum, tilting trajectories from peril to possibility. As applause thundered, Voss caught her eye, a silent nod echoing their first, a full circle of gratitude unspoken yet profound. In the world's relentless churn, such moments remind, lives intertwine in the smallest gestures, collars loosened not just on shirts, but on destinies, binding strangers into saviors, one knot at a time. The night pulsed on, Futures unfolding, the Billionaire and the Waitress forever linked by a thread of crimson silk and serendipity.